Hi, everyone. Welcome to our LinkedIn Live with Pete Pachal. I'm Linda Zebian, VP of Comms at Muck Rack. We're going to give folks a couple of minutes to trickle in before we get started.
Hey, guys. Hey, Linda. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for being here, Pete.
That was my pleasure.
We're just gonna give it a couple more seconds before we get started.
Thank you all for spending your lunch hour here with us, or I guess brunch hour, maybe on the West Coast.
Yeah, I was gonna say lunch hour. What's a lunch hour? Working from home, right? Lunch hour, thing of the past.
Chime in the comments when the last time was you spent an hour on lunch and you didn't have like a lunch.
I know.
Yeah.
We have to do better with that.
We probably do. Yeah. Chew your food, people.
Yeah. Step away from the desk. Okay, I think we should get started, right? Welcome, everyone. I'll introduce myself again. I'm Linda Zebian, VP of Comms at Muck Rack. I'm so excited to be here today with Pete Pachal from the Media Copilot. We're going to be talking all about skills and AI as PR people. We need them. We know we have to have them. Which skills do we need? How do we get them? How high is the bar? How hard is it to get those skills? And what do we do to refine them, get them, and keep flexing those muscles? So super excited for this conversation. I'm going to let Pete introduce himself before we dive right in. Go ahead, Pete.
Sweet. Hey, everyone. I'm Pete Pachal, and I actually have a slide to help me introduce myself. So I'm just going to start presenting right away, if that's all right. Pressing this. Let's see if this works. Can everyone... Oh, no. Oh, wait. No, there it is. Spam. Go StreamYard. Yes. All right. So this is the presentation you're attending. If this was not what you were expecting, you're in the wrong room. And we're going to move on. Oh, there's always a delay here. I got you. It's going to take a second. There we are. This is me, everybody. I'm Pete Pachal. If you don't know me, I've been a tech journalist for a while. I'll just say, well, I got the stat on here. I'm always a little uncomfortable saying about 25 plus years. Worked in a bunch of global newsrooms, Mashable. I spent a good chunk of the 2010s there. I was at CoinDesk a couple years back when crypto went through its roller coaster years, and also done some work for NBC, PC Mag, others. I've been heavily involved in editorial strategy for a long time. And I've built operations around newsletters, product reviews, and most recently AI. I actually figured out CoinDesk's AI strategy. And while I was at Mashable, I actually was part of the team that sort of invented the way people told stories on Snapchat. So yeah, you're welcome, or I'm sorry. And I do a lot of stuff for other places, like here in Muck Rack. I'm a columnist for Fast Company. I occasionally appear on TV talking about tech, AI, or crypto. And most recently, I founded the Media Copilot in late 2023. It started as a newsletter. It's now a newsletter and podcast, and also an AI training academy, very narrowly focused on the media. So PR professionals and journalists. And I do a little consulting as well. So that is me. Awesome. So this is just a little bit of level setting on why AI skills matter these days, particularly for PR professionals. So all these stats are from a recent study by Muck Rack, and I'm not just doing it because this is the Muck Rack presentation. It's actually pretty good data. I cite it all the time in my newsletter. So obviously 3 out of 4 PR pros are using AI these days. That's not surprising. What might be a little surprising is that when you pair that with the last stat on this slide, that only 38% of PR firms have an AI policy, which is up from the year before, but it still indicates there's still quite a few that don't have one. There's clearly sort of a grassroots thing happening here, that people are sort of learning this stuff on their own, is presumably why you're here, and which is kind of cool. It's sort of, this is a almost democratic tech movement of people recognizing the middle stat, which is that AI helps you work faster, and it can even help with quality. And you look at that stat at 78% helping with quality, sort of puts a little cold water on the notion that AI is always just junk, right? Like it does a bad job. It can actually help with quality as well. And moving on to the next. Oh, here we go. All right, so these are the skills we're going to talk about today. We'll spend a little time on each one. So we're going to start with some structured prompting. And then we're going to talk a little bit about content remixing, very popular. So essentially getting more out of your content with AI. We're going to talk about a specific use case of using AI as a devil's advocate to turn it into a real collaborator, a very useful collaborator. And then we're going to touch on privacy because it comes up all the time in basically every presentation I do. Everyone wants to know what's going on with data privacy. And then I'll have a few thoughts on building your own toolkit, sort of what are the tools today, what are their strengths and weaknesses, and a few specific recommendations for the use cases we're going to talk about and these skills.
Great. Before we jump right in, I do want to encourage folks to use the comments for questions. We are going to take questions throughout, and I will interrupt Pete in appropriate ways. But we do want to take your questions. We're here for you. So go ahead and ask, and we will get to questions at the end if we have time. We have this time for up to an hour. So if folks want to stick around beyond the half an hour, we'll try to stick around and answer as many questions as we can at the end, but we will be trying to get to them while Pete's presenting. Sorry, go ahead, Pete.
No problem. Yeah, thank you for that. All right, so we're going to talk about structured prompting. Now, I really wanted to get this one out first because prompting, beyond everything else I teach, like tools come and go, techniques come and go, but prompting, which is honestly just talking to the AI, is a thing that's not going away, obviously. But also, I think it's evolved quite a bit in the last year and a half. So 6 months ago, there's a kind of almost a sea change in AI with the introduction of thinking models. And that's really expanded the capabilities of these things. And so, whereas before, I think there was a lot of emphasis on frameworks, and we're going to talk about frameworks. Frameworks aren't obsolete, but the idea that your interactions with an AI has expanded the amount of things you can do with them and get out of them. So that sounds complicated, but I've really tried to sort of simplify it in this very simple structure of like sort of two different buckets, two different ways to kind of interact with an AI. This is, again, like I'm saying, I'm simplifying here, but generally this is a good way, I think, to approach using AI. And one is when you think about what an AI can create for you. And this is what I would call an output focused prompt. And this is kind of how we all used to think about AI and still do to some extent. It's almost like Santa Claus, right? It's like, oh, AI, write this thing for me. Oh, AI, well, create an image for me, create a presentation, do stuff. And I want to get stuff from you. That's still a good use of AI, and it's getting better at building the stuff. But there's a sort of another use case, particularly with thinking models and these even more sophisticated non-thinking models, which I would call collaborative use of AI. This is where it's less about the output and more about the conversation. This is when you're kind of working on a problem, thinking through something, and you just want a collaborative partner to sort of work on you with that on every step of the journey. So I think that makes sense. There's obviously overlap between those two things, but I think when you go into an interaction with an AI, like thinking this way, do I want something like right away, or do I want to sort of work on something with the AI? If you think about that, that will give you a good path to go on, and I'm going to have a little bit more guidance on each one of those. So we're going to start with output-focused prompting because I think this is what most people are used to. And some of you may already be familiar with prompt frameworks. If you Google prompt frameworks, you're going to get a lot of sort of strange mnemonic acronyms, and some of them are like precise or scraper or et cetera. And each of the letters stands for something. Those are all potentially useful for other various use cases. I think if you're not an engineer, it gets a little intimidating to remember all these frameworks. And so I just have a couple that are really simple. You know, they're 3 letters. The number 3 is great, and they're both words that you can pronounce. And I want to start with the first one. It's called the POP format. So this breaks down to persona, objective, and parameters. So persona is obviously like act as a scuba diver, act as a PR professional, act as a professional archivist or whatever. So this is kind of a thing you use to ground the AI in terms of the domain expertise you're looking for. The objective, something that is, the non-optional part of it. You got to tell it to do something. And then parameters. This is all sort of the things that you that you want to specify in the output that you want, because you probably want a specific word count. If it's text, you want to if it's an image, you're thinking about angle, lighting, etc. All those things. You're probably thinking about audience. You're probably thinking about a whole bunch of factors that you want to help it zero in. This is using AI is almost an exercise in narrowing where it can go. I often use a tree analogy where it's like, oh, your request goes through the trunk of the tree. And then it's like, should I go to this branch or that branch? Should I go to this twig or that twig? This leaf or this leaf? And AI is kind of all about steering it to the right branch and the right leaf, while also not quite knowing exactly which leaf you want, but you don't want something way over here. So that's sort of the art of using structured prompting like this. I also
and you can, and Pete, sorry to interrupt you, but
no
and you don't have to get it right off the bat, right? Like the tree can grow forever, kind of thing, right?
Right. Yeah. Iteration. You're going to find that theme repeated in the presentation today. But it is always, you always want to get as far as you can go when you start the iteration process. So, you don't want to be 60% of the way there. You kind of want to be 80 or 90% of the way there, and then sort of refine it from there. So that using a structured framework like this you'll increase your chances of getting 80, 90, 95% of the way there. And I'll just really quick word on the top format. You'll notice like there's a lot of ways we use AI, particularly with search engines. So if you think about Perplexity, if some of you are familiar, you're not giving it a persona, right? I mean, you might give it domain expertise or ask about it within there, but in that case, it's really more about the topic you're researching. And so much of AI today is helping with research that I just sort of slightly tweak the pop format and just turn that P into a T, and then think about it as a topic instead of a persona. So I've kind of actually already just gone over this. So this is the pop framework in a little more detail. Like I say, I think the key takeaway here is that last box that talks about parameters, it seems short. That's where you want to spend most of your thinking and your text generally for this kind of stuff. But yeah, this is the pop framework broken down a little more. Sweet. All right. So quick example. So this is a pretty simple example, just to sort of illustrate the power of structured prompting. So you can see here, this is a Write a Thought Leadership article about the Garmin Fenix 8. Sorry if that's your client. Or you're welcome, actually. Smartwatch aligns with the wellness trend of longevity. So, you might think this is this is a fairly decently specific prompt. But it could probably be better. And that's, I've put the question to you guys. I wrote it down here. Like, well, what's wrong with it? And go ahead and just shout out in the comments if you want. Like, particularly thinking about the pop format that we just talked about. If anyone has any thoughts on how we could improve this prompt, what would do that? Who has some ideas? Like, what's wrong with it, and what are some ideas you have to improve it? And I'll just wait 30 seconds or so for some thoughts to come in.
Don't be shy, y'all. Come on. Critique Pete. It's your chance.
This is live, folks. This is the
Come
chance.
on.
This is the chance to participate. Oh, come on.
All right, Tara.
There you go. Data output to the product. Yeah, exactly. The little more, you don't have context. That's actually a really important point. Audience would be really nice. Exactly. Who am I promoting this to? Persona, right off the bat. The first P is missing.
All right, there they are.
Yeah. Would be the thought leader and clear who the audience is. Again, yeah, exactly. All of this is really good stuff. Right, better specifics. Cool. So this is great, guys. You're awesome. You're thinking in exactly the right direction. If you move on to the next slide. Exactly. So this is an example of how you would do this prompt in the pop style, right? So let's be ambitious. Let's make it the CEO of Garmin who's writing this blog post, and we're giving it an objective. So we're refining this a little bit. It's a thought leadership article. Again, it's about longevity, but it's got a goal attached here. I want to emphasize Garmin's leadership in performance driven wearables. And you can see all the parameters. There's so many parameters. I had to lower the font size. Like So audience is very specific, millennials and Gen Xers. Word count, very good. Conversational, but authoritative. And I want a strong personal perspective from the CEO and a call to action. And then you can see the last bullet is like, I'm going to upload the press release so it knows what I'm talking about. I'm not going to rely on whatever the AI is to go out into the web, or worse, make something up, which we all know AIs can do. So giving it that clear context, well, I wouldn't say it would eliminate the chances of that, but it would reduce them considerably. So that's what we have here. I would actually, I would love to demo this because it's only going to take a second. So I'm actually going to switch the presentation really quickly and share my screen if that's possible. And here we are. Let me know if this doesn't work and we'll just move on. But it is. Can anyone see it? Oh, no, wait, it's right here. Oh, yeah, there it is. My screen's one of the things. There it is. Cool. So I'm just going to go here. Here's ChatGPT. Here's all my stuff. And I'm going to actually start a new chat. And I'm going to just grab this first one and show you what results. But at the same time, I'm going to go and do sort of a before after here and open another chat with my buddy ChatGPT and get all this stuff in here. And I'm actually just pasting in the labels, like, because if anything, it's going to help it and understand the structure. And so I'm using 4.0 because it's faster. And so, okay, so it's gone out there. It's actually sought out some pictures. I hope it didn't just create these. I don't think it did. It went a little fast if they would actually create them. And it's written something, and it's kind of a list, and it's kind of, like, okay, well, that's a thing, I guess. And if I go over here, boom, it's already half done. And you can see it's like it's already starting with this personal perspective, something that I've learned from as CEO Carmen. We've always designed products. It's obviously internalized that messaging and what it wants to get across. It's got this nice little mini list in here, nice formatting. Anyway, we won't hang out while it sort of finishes off, but you can see like the stark difference from something that, just kind of like, well, write this thing for me. And I actually forgot to attach the press release, but even without that, it's like the structure is very good. I might do this again and just sort of like attach it for context and edit to redo it. But you get the idea, like how an improved structure with a lot of clear parameters it's night and day in terms of the output that you get. So I'm just going to go back to the presentation. And there we go. And awesome. All right, moving on. So let's talk a bit about collaborative prompting. And for this, you obviously are going to get into a dialogue with the AI. You're going to work on a problem together. And I put this here to sort of give you an idea of what that looks like in a PR workflow sense. So you're basically going to come to it with your problem, your challenge, and then you would engage in sort of a back and forth on the refinement of those ideas. A little unlock here is if you do this verbally, it's kind of almost a little more natural, and would even save time if you're, say, in the course of your day and you're doing dishes or you're getting lunch or you're walking your dog. That can still be work time. You can still collaborate with your AI. Hopefully it doesn't feel like work because you're just chatting with someone and sort of working through ideas. But I find that to be a really good sort of efficiency unlock, and that I can get that time and actually keep working on a problem. And certainly having the right context is important. So having, either files at the ready or specifically getting this behavior into an app-like interface. So I'm thinking specifically of things like custom GPTs and Claude projects. And if you're unfamiliar, those are sort of ways to put context and data that you want to keep coming back to into one place. So I put here that a great use case for this kind of collaborative prompting is actually creating the prompt that we just did, so it's like you can if you, particularly when now that we have deep research tools that take a lot of time but do really thorough work, you want to get those prompts, those structure prompts, really good out of the gate as much as possible. And so when you're thinking about what you even want to ask for, like this is kind of like a collaborative thing, is like I'm not even quite sure what the output should be. It's a good to sort of treat a collaborative session as kind of a whiteboarding session with the AI to sort of get that prompt exactly how you want it. So here's an example of a collaborative problem that you might not have all of the everything figured out for, because it's a bit of a crisis situation. You'll sort of see here. So it's like someone, say a reporter, just published a piece suggesting that an app that of your clients is collecting more data than it actually says it is, and there's a lot of nuances here. It doesn't look good. You need something sort of done fairly quickly, but you also need to think it through. So here's a good example of how to do that. Before we write anything, can we work through this with the best tone, messaging, themes, etc. And so this enters you into a collaboration. Now there are so many different interactions. The temptation here is to kind of just say the world's your oyster now and go do it. But I think there's a little more guidance I can give. Again, these are pretty open ended, but I have a bit of a structure to sort of think through what this typically looks like. And so on the next slide, I think about it as sort of a three-phase process, or three kinds of almost like follow-up questions to that. Now, I won't demo this because it could go in any direction. But if you think about those follow-ups as like in three different buckets, as exploratory and search enhanced, which is kind of like bringing in context from the web, and then executional when you're sort of ready to go to the output stage, right? So exploratory is really you're refining the thinking, you're going deeper. This is probably most of the conversation, sort of back and forth, like, oh, it suggests three things. Wait, key in on that second one. What about this, this, and this? And then you sort of go deeper and deeper into specifics of the issue. Then there'll probably be times you're like, I don't know this, but I need information or data. I know it's out there. And you tell the AI to sort of go out and get it, like find the what actually was in the earnings report 2 years ago, or what was this study? Are there any studies for this? And summarize them for me, and then let's talk about that and how to add that to the discussion. Obviously, your AI needs to be able to access the web for this. Fortunately, most of them do now. That actually wasn't true a few months ago, but now most of the AIs will be able to bring in external data. So that's a really powerful tool in these collaborations. And then it's executional, right? It's really just kind of moving from this planning stage and like, okay, I've got it. Now here's the output. And here it's kind of like, you can see the examples here from the stemming from the example we just talked about, sort of what are some alternative narrative frames, again, recent examples of other mental health apps and data concerns, and then it's like map this messaging to each delivery channel, and then suggest a rollout plan. And then hopefully at the end of this conversation, which didn't take too long, maybe, I don't know, I'd estimate 20 minutes, you have a well-informed plan thought through with essentially a colleague on what to do. That's the power of collaborative prompting. Cool. All right.
I have a question, actually. When you talked about customized GPTs, how hard is it to set those up? Because I think a lot of folks are more comfortable just using general prompting. Is how hard is it to set those up? And B, what if you've been using like ChatGPT Enterprise for a while and it has all of your history? Can you somehow get like all of your history into a customized GPT easily? Is there a process for that? Or do you have to start fresh now, I guess is my question.
Yeah, good question. So on the first one, it is not hard at all. ChatGPT, I'll demo if there's time. I know we've got a few more skills to get through. So maybe
Cool.
when we get to things a little later, I can demo one that I've built for the devil's advocate skill. But it's very easy. There are a number of fields in a custom GPT. There's only one that really counts, which is the instructions. And that's like essentially it doesn't have to be long, but it can be a well thought out prompt, a very structured prompt on what you want the behavior of this AI to be. And, it could involve domain expertise, usually does. But beyond that, there are sort of specific interactions you might want it to do, particularly when it's sort of being a devil's advocate to you, which is can be a very helpful thing that you can specify so that you don't have to sort of reprompt every time. Obviously, you need to pay for it. That's the thing. You have access to GPTs to use if you're a free user. You cannot create them unless you are a
Right.
ChatGPT Plus or greater. So that is, and obviously for enterprise, you'll be able to do it collaboratively too, and sort of give people access to various aspects of them.
Cool.
So the second part is exporting in your data. Um, there really isn't a great way to do that, to my knowledge. That said, Chat GPT recently started essentially, I think they call it memory, but it's kind of like extended memory because they've already had memory. And so now behind the scenes, if you enable it, it's basically going to remember more about your interactions by default. So in a sense, like you as long as you're using the same account, it's taken care of. Uh, Exporting that to another AI is, to my knowledge, probably basically impossible right now. And so you would need to sort of continue to use ChatGPT, but that knowledge of you should transfer to your GPTs and everything else, like all your interactions with it.
Mm, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's talk a little bit about content remixing, um, which of course is essentially you have some content that you've made. It's hopefully good, but you want to do more with it. Like you might have a blog post, you have a video, maybe even stuff you've recorded from events. Very useful thing to do with AI is to take that content and have it essentially reversion it into a different format or the same format, just sort of done differently. Text to text is obviously a very common one where you have a longer piece of content and you want to get, say, social posts, LinkedIn posts, that kind of thing. Oh, by the way, Lori, I see Lori in the comments. Yes, you will be able to get the slides. Just you wait. There'll be a link at the end. But the content remixing, this is one of those cases where you almost want to think of it a bit of as a kind of a collaborative thing, but it's really more like an iterative thing because although there are a lot of apps that do this, all of them will allow you to prompt it as well. So in other words, like prompting it. Better to sort of give an example. Say you want to take a podcast, which was like an hour long, and you want to turn that into clips. A lot of apps, well, some apps do that very well out of the box now. To make sure it's getting the stuff you want, you're going to want to work on that prompt, and you're going to want to iterate on it until it's doing something that is as close to what you can sort of get. That's sort of 80-90% of the way there. That's ideal for your use case. So essentially, you want to look at these as projects. Like when it's like, okay, I want an AI to turn this into that. It's going to get you there sort of a little bit out of the box, but the more you work with it and just keep working on it, and could be anywhere from 20 minutes to hours, depending on the tool, the format change, and your patience or expertise with it. Um, but it's worth it because once you have that done, once you're like, okay, I've got this reversioning prompt or app or whatever, and I got it doing exactly what I want it to do, that's very repeatable. Now you just sort of drag and drop for all future interactions, at least until they update the AI. And then you kind of have to do some of that again. But that's sort of the reality of it these days. When they update these models, they can change the behavior a little bit. They try not to, and usually when it's an older model, it doesn't change that much. But still, you should be saving these and treating them as projects. So I didn't want to leave you without an example here. So again, while that first prompt that I have there is kind of weak, I didn't even put in the prompt the pop format, um, but it's not terrible as a starting point. It is kind of terrible as a starting point, but you can do a little better as a starting point. But I wanted to show you sort of the difference of like where you would start probably to something that is much more refined. So rather than just sort of relying on what ChatGPT or Claude or whatever knows about LinkedIn and thinks is a good post, um, you know, one, come in with your own parameters, but also your own examples. So I think we all have in our heads like what makes a good LinkedIn post, for example. There's probably a few different formats. There's the one with the sort of short, punchy stuff. There's the one that's like the personal story that you apply to business. It's you could get save a bunch of these good examples and essentially give that to it as context. And this is where things like a custom GPT or a project like a folder where you can have these same examples and keep coming back to them. You can see here, um, I even have a style guide, right? This is actually literally a refined prompt that I have on writing things in my style. So I have like a file that's like, here's the style of my LinkedIn writing. And so this is kind of what you would get sort of at the end of this process. Notice I said refined and not final, because obviously you're always going to want to keep iterating on this, and certainly when they update the models, you're probably going to need to add a thing or two, and maybe even redo it if you think there's another model that's even better at this. But it's always good to do the work.
That's so
Um,
smart. I'm going to use those. Those are
yeah.
really good parameters. We had a question from a LinkedIn user. Do you recommend PR pros use AI for writing? I've been leery of that. Thought partner,
Yeah, good
yes.
question. This is like,
Exact language. Yeah, exact language. I mean, we get this question a lot. So I'm curious your take.
yeah, it's funny. I have a whole writing workshop that talks about some of those hard questions about AI writing. And I'll answer really briefly. The way I think about it is this: I try to separate things into, again, buckets, but not too many. And when I think about a writing project, I think it's good to think about like, do you need human authenticity here, or is this like more functional writing? Um, so, for example, even on the media side, on the journalism side, it's become fairly acceptable, not everywhere, but like for social media, like tweets and those sort of brief snippets, to be AI written. There's usually a policy somewhere that says that that's the case, even if the tweet isn't marked that way. But it is like that's clearly more functional. Like it's just some almost placeholder text to kind of like promote a link to an article. So when you think about those use cases, um, that's where you can kind of start to get some guidance on where it's kind of like quote unquote okay for AI to write and maybe not. Now that said, you saw me do the little Garmin post, and that was a whole CEO thing, and it's like, wait a minute, isn't that cheating? That's like he's just making up stuff. And yeah, I mean, fair enough. Like this gets into a whole ethical thing, and where you need to disclose. Certainly, transparency and disclosure should be the default. Um, and I would say that the thing is like the AIs are getting so good at sort of simulating some of that human touch. There's guaranteed it's going to start to be used more and more. So the thing is, like, again, if you default to transparency and you have a clear understanding of what's functional and what's authentic and where the human is taking part. And I actually have this broken down into levels. This is my whole writing workshop. It's like you go from level 0, which is no AI, and level 4 is like AI not even checked, which is not recommended, by the way. You kind of have to sort of think about like level 1, 2, 3, like where the human is what the human's doing, and then what your disclosure should be. Sorry, that wasn't quick at all. It's kind of like trying to compress a whole writing workshop into one answer. But it's a great question because it's a complicated answer. But I think if you take anything from what I said, is like transparency is the best policy. All right, we're on the third skill, which is using AI as a devil's advocate. This is a really great unlock in your use of AI. So you might remember, it was actually really recently. It was a couple of weeks ago that OpenAI put out an update to ChatGPT 4.0, and it essentially increased the sycophancy. And what that means is that it was essentially doing that thing that all AIs do to some extent, like essentially supporting you and saying, "Oh, you're smart. Oh, that's a great point. Oh, all this stuff." And giving it steroids, and it kind of made it less useful and even problematic in some ways. But like I said, all AIs do this to some extent, and it's not the most helpful thing, particularly when you're being collaborative. So there are some specific things you can tell the AI, and I've got a prompt for you in a second, that will essentially end run that and make it a better devil's advocate, like to challenge your ideas, to find weaknesses in your arguments. This is obviously super useful in a lot of work cases in PR in particular, like crisis preparation, prepping for interviews, particularly hostile ones, and getting ahead of questions, um, and just giving it the right persona for like the audiences you're going to be putting your stuff in front of. So all possible to configure, even with some sort of these basic AIs. I mean, you might think you need like really specific products or something like super narrowly focused. No, you can build these in ChatGPT, and you might even be able to do it to some extent outside of a custom GPT. It's just a matter of prompting and making sure you tell it to do it. I have a prompt coming right up. All right, so this is a pretty general purpose. Definitely recommend something like this. You keep either in a Google Doc or as a custom GPT or something, but you can see the instructions here is to act as a strategic challenger. Your job is to stress test my ideas, find the weak points, question my assumptions, highlight the blind spots. Or always important to keep things constructive. We're still working through problems with you, but again, it's not there to flatter you. And asking tough questions and pushing for clarity, logic, and impact. So this can apply to a lot of different situations. Again, not all collaborative prompting is this, but I think it's a very, very important subset of prompting. I use a variation of this as a writing assistant. And there's more elaborate interactions I have with the writing assistant that will actually address the previous question about AI writing. So it's like when I have it challenge me verbally, I want it to then write things that are based on my quotes as opposed to bridging that. Although it'll do a little bridging, but it'll clearly mark it. So I know exactly what's human written and what's AI written. It's a really powerful thing, interaction that I can pair with this strategic challenger to really accelerate the writing process. It's really quite amazing to talk about the results I've seen with it. So for PR, I think there are some really smart sort of ways to use it and use cases. So obviously it's challenging your presumptions from the get-go, but also like simulating the journalist perspective. And it can be very specific. Like if you have a go-to set of contacts and essentially personas in the journalism field, you can give it a lot of context and very specific context. And I got another sort of prompt for that. And particularly like some of these very important relationships, I think it pays to even like have simulators for maybe even specific people beyond just the personas. And then like I said about the interactions I've mapped out for writing, there's a whole set of interactions you can map out for media training even. So like think about, you've simulating sort of this journalist perspective. Well, what about prompting it to actually interview someone? And then so like this is another sort of unlock on using AI. If you reverse that telescope or reverse the interaction, usually you're asking the AI stuff, have it ask you and probe your knowledge. And so this can become a really great media training application where it's interviewing a spokesperson or yourself and then evaluating your responses based on the context you give it. Really, really smart interaction. So here we go. So here, this is the sort of journalist simulator that I kind of mentioned on the last slide. This is a prompt you guys can have. Again, this assumes, you can see from the prompt at the top, that I've downloaded a bunch of articles, maybe some podcast transcripts, the profile of the person, maybe some recent social posts, and thrown that all into context. And so now it has all this perspective from this specific person. It could be a set of people, it could be a specific person. And then, you just give these guidelines on how to respond. These are essentially the parameters of the AI. And then, showing the curiosity, skepticism, trying to sort of put in some of these journalistic traits within the prompting. Very important. And then certainly the one towards the bottom there about keeping statements factual and admitting when unsure, always a good thing to include in almost any AI, honestly. But this is gets you on the path to doing that journalistic simulator, and then if you add some interactivity, I didn't put it here, on being able to do verbal interviews with you, that's even better. Oh, excuse me. Okay. Data privacy, obviously a huge topic in AI. It's sort of ongoing in terms of how this is playing out in sort of the enterprise level. Everyone wants to know about it because everyone and everyone's client cares about it. They want to know where their stuff's going. Is it being training? Is it being used to train the AI? Even if it's not, what actually is going on with it and who has access to it? And I'm going to give you some very top level guidance here to sort of help you on your path to figuring out what your personal policy should be and maybe even what that should be where you work. Excuse me one second. Okay. So you can think of this as kind of a tiered system. It's arguably, I put basic, advanced, and total, but it's like good, better, best in a sense. So when you think about privacy, often you think about uh, the notion that ChatGPT is saving everything you tell it, which is true. It's actually what it does by default. It's going to take all of your interactions. This is for free accounts and paid accounts, not the case for enterprise accounts, but for free accounts and paid accounts, it's going to take your interactions and put them in training data. What they don't tell you, although it's pretty common knowledge, it's easy to turn off. There's literally, like, I don't have the thing here. I could demo it easily. You go into settings, you turn off improve the model for everyone, and it won't do that anymore. You can do this on a free account. There's a misconception that, oh, if you're using it for free, you can't turn off the data storage. No, you can turn it off. You can turn it off for almost every single AI out there, whether it's Claude, Microsoft Copilot. Notably, Meta won't let you do that. Everything's going into training data if you use Meta AI. So just be advised. Obviously, this is great that you can turn it off. Not great is that it's not really a systemic solution. It's very easy to forget. If you're a business, it's not really going to help you that much. You can't just tell all your people, hey, turn it off and we're going to trust you. So that's when you need to do something a little more advanced. And so if you get a business plan, like I said, ChatGPT Enterprise, most of the all the enterprise plans, to my knowledge, will not put your data in training data. If you use a third-party tool, it uses the API, and APIs specifically don't put any interactions in training data. So that level of protection is usually good enough for most business use cases. Now, when I say good enough, the con is, of course, the data that you have, the interactions, still has to go to the cloud, the AI's cloud. It's going to leave your premises. It goes to them. Also, your data will be stored on their cloud somewhere if you're using like files, like that sort of thing, the context. So essentially, it's going to require trust in their terms of service. And if you have another vendor in there, someone in between you and the model provider, that's another layer of that. So all of that needs to sort of be taken into consideration on terms of the level of risk. For some folks, that's still too much risk. Generally, I would say if something is the main thing you want to avoid is getting the data leakage into training data, because then that can be regurgitated at some point. So as long as that's taken care of, usually for most, like, again, it depends how sensitive the information is. The advanced stuff is probably good enough. But of course, check with your organization, check with your client, etc. So the last one here is total, which is using AI locally. And this is literally downloading the model to your laptop, or could run it on a server somewhere. and then the data and everything that you tell it is never outside of your control, never leaves the premises, which is great. Obviously, there is a technical component to this. It's not something that, I mean, it's less complicated than you think, to be honest with you. There's a few sort of no code platforms that'll let you do it. There's going to be higher cost because you're paying for your compute. And unless you have a cloud of NVIDIA GPUs somewhere that you have access to, it's probably going to be a lot slower than you're used to from these public facing models. But you can do it. There are investigative teams on the journalism side that do this, that will use AI locally on laptops and sort of clean machines without even connections to the internet outside of when they download stuff. And that's sort of just the level of privacy that they require. So this is how you sort of can think about the levels of privacy in whatever you're doing. Again, for an individual, maybe the basic is fine. I think for most businesses, you're obviously going to want the sort of the middle there, and maybe for very rare interactions, you might want to use it locally.
We did have a question, Pete. Can you use incognito searches to protect or ensure privacy?
Not really. I mean, incognito it's kind of a misconception that it's very private at all. That's just for browser stuff. There's an AI equivalent of incognito, which is I think it's a private chat. I think that's what ChatGPT calls it. And even if you have improved the model for everyone clicked on, if you start a private chat, it won't remember anything from that specific interaction. That's again, it's one of those things that it's easy to forget, not a systemic solution. But if for whatever reason the policy that you're operating under requires that back and forth, that data retention, it's a way of sort of getting around that for temporarily, but it's not really a great solution.
Great.
Cool. So we're coming up towards the end here, but I do have some thoughts on building your own toolkit and just a few recommendations on products. I'm going to start with just sort of the major models and major like at least four of the major ones that I think most people treat as go-tos, and what their relative strengths are today. And happy to sort of go into more detail on this when we get to some Q&A. I've talked about ChatGPT a lot. I've demoed it. It's not necessarily because it's the absolute best, but it is pretty darn good. So ChatGPT obviously OpenAI rather creates a lot of foundational models. They were the first to come out with sort of thinking models. There are a lot of features on ChatGPT that make it sticky. If you haven't used deep research yet, I definitely recommend it. Their image model creation now is much better than it used to be. And like I said, the custom GPTs, the project folders, once you start setting more of those up, like my writing assistant is a custom GPT, I keep coming back to it. The con, I think, and this has always been the case with ChatGPT, I think, and it might just be a symptom of how widely used it is, but I do find it sort of gets lazy more often. Now, this is my read. I don't have a data point here to attach to this, but I anecdotally, I hear this a lot from people too, in that it'll tell you, like, you'll ask it to do something and it'll kind of half do it, and you have to prompt it again to kind of get it to finish. And just the answers are a little less robust. Like, you remember the demo, when I did the demo, the out of the gate bad prompt got a pretty weak thing, right? Like, it didn't really do a lot. It had a few points in there and had a very short intro. It kind of just did, it's less than you would expect from that, and probably less than you would get out of these other models here. So, and just keep that in mind as you use it. The more you can need to prompt, the more you use it, the more you'll probably need to prompt it to really sort of give it its all. So I talked about Claude. Claude is really, really good at writing, and it's kind of hard to quantify. It's just, if you're a writer, you kind of like, oh yeah, it gets to that 80-90% with less prompting than you would need in most other models. Again, they're all getting pretty good at writing. Claude has still maintained this edge. It's also really good at coding, and it's kind of considered the gold standard in coding. If you're into coding at all, Claude's great. The feature set just really isn't quite as mature. It only just got web search, and that was I think about a month or two ago. And it has some neat integrations with Google Drive and stuff, but it just doesn't have that same stickiness as some of the things in ChatGPT. Google Gemini, really great model now. For a long time, it wasn't. But Google's kind of finally caught up, so it performs really, really well. If you use the models with the higher numbers, so there's Flash 1.5 and Flash 2. If you use the ones that are 2.5, you'll find some really impressive outputs. One of the best things Gemini's done, it's really pushed context windows. So context windows are just sort of the amount of stuff you can throw at an AI, the amount of files and how big those files can be. Most of the models, the ones certainly here, all have pretty big context windows. Google's has the largest. And you can literally upload like books or even encyclopedias into a single chat, and it'll be able to kind of take all that into context. Really, really impressive performance all around. Worst thing about it, it has the absolute worst model selection. Now, all the models have these really annoying names because you have to go into ChatGPT and it has this drop down, and it's like, do I do 4.0, 4.5, or 0.3? What even is this stuff? And there's a widespread acknowledgement in the AI like, this is a problem. Well, the problem is most acute if you ever go to that menu in Gemini. There are so many models. There were so many different names. Some of them have like the exact same number. There's 2.5 Flash or Pro or what have you. And for anyone who just uses this stuff casually, you just have no clue. Frankly, I have a lot of problems figuring out what I want to do with Gemini when I go there. This is a problem that I hope gets solved soon. ChatGPT is supposedly going to come out with something that is essentially an AI system that'll pick the model for you, but it seems like we're a number of months still away from that. And finally, Microsoft Copilot, it's there. It's actually pretty handy. It uses a lot of ChatGPT or OpenAI's models. So the performance is good. It's right there in your PC. So if you're on a PC, it's handy to have. You got the web access and has had that for a long time. So it's very mature. I will say, again, this is a little anecdotal, but the outputs, if you compare them even directly to ChatGPT, they're a little watered down. It kind of feels like sometimes like the McDonald's of AI models. That's just my read of it. That said, if you have the patience to iterate and work with it, and if it's your model, it's very capable. It's very capable of giving you really thoughtful outputs. And obviously, a lot of places are Microsoft shops, and you could do a lot worse than what you're being forced to use. So yeah, Copilot's actually not that bad.
If it's the McDonald's, then what is ChatGPT?
That's the In-N-Out Burger.
Okay.
Claude is Taco Bell. And
Okay.
Gemini is Domino's, obviously.
All right. Learned a lot just on that one slide.
I wanted to leave you guys. I talked about remixing. I didn't talk too much about the tools. I wanted to leave you with a few of the ones that are my go-tos. So Claude Projects, really good for text to text. So even though my writing assistant is in ChatGPT, my reversioners are in Claude because it's just really good at this. Particularly if you give it context and you really think about that sort of Uber prompt. You'll see when you go to it, there's like an instruction prompt. If you iterate on that, give it the right context. It's very good at like taking stuff and making it like a LinkedIn post or something. Opus Clip is my go-to. I've auditioned. I do 2 podcasts. I clip them all the time. I've auditioned many different software, out of the box software solutions for like drag and drop your podcast. Give me a bunch of clips. Opus still the best. I still every now and then check the other stuff. It's like, nope, Opus is still the best. Again, my read. They don't pay me anything for this. It's just a tool I use every week, really, and it's very handy. And then this is a tool I haven't used a lot, but I like it. So let me explain what this is. So you probably all heard of Notebook LM. This is a Google product where it's like a supercharged folder for files, and you can apply AI to it. I've actually got a whole presentation for that. But the great unlock of Notebook LM, why it sort of took the world by storm 6 or 7 months ago, was its podcast feature. So it's like you have a bunch of stuff. You can instantaneously create a podcast, a very listenable podcast with 2 people chatting with each other. about the topic, and it's a really neat way to kind of like, oh, verbally sort of, or in audio form, get a download on a topic. This is the 11 Labs version of that, um, and it's good, but you can also customize the voices. So the thing about Notebook LM, even though the output is pretty good, it's not really presentable, if you know what I mean. Like, people have tried to take Notebook LM audio and turn that into podcasts. It's That's not quite ready for prime time. 11 Labs kind of is. So essentially, the short way of saying that is like, this Gen FM product is turning that into like content, that idea into something presentable and potentially publishable. Um, so that's why I really kind of like it. So it's kind of like reversing that idea of like, oh, I want an article out of this um, out of this podcast. Well, now I want a podcast out of this article, and this is kind of like a potential go-to for that, if that's something you're interested in. Oh, and that's it. That's the last one. That was the content. So thanks, everyone. Oh, wow, we're making really good time. I think I did this all right.
Perfect.
So if you like the presentation, I do this for a living. I do everything from sort of lunch and learn type stuff about this length, all the way to uh, workshops that last several sessions and are very comprehensive to sort of upskill teams. So if you're into that, please give me an email. And if you're not, I have a newsletter. I'd appreciate a subscribe. Or if you just want to shout out and say hi, just get in touch. You can scan this QR code and you will get all the slides from this presentation. How about that? So you can have all the prompts and share them and use them for good, not evil.
Thank you, Pete. So many good nuggets and gems from this presentation. I learned so much. I came here to learn, and I learned so much. I'm getting the presentation, and I'm going to use those prompts. We have like a couple minutes left. If y'all want to stay on, we have a question. I heard that there are tools that can identify if AI was used to create something. Is it true? What if written materials part of original part was original and part of it was AI generated? How do these tools know?
They don't. They don't really work because one, the technology progresses so quickly that they can't quite keep up. And also, the thing you just pointed out is a very real use case, which is stuff can be hybrid. It can be partially human and partially AI. So, um, so in the sense that even if they work perfectly, they're not really, are they useful? You know, if they're sort of doing these, what you might call false positives. Um, that said, it's a data point. You know, I wouldn't say like if you AI detection shouldn't be a part of a context strategy. I think you just have to take it as what it is, which is just a data point. It's not definitive.
Yeah, that's how I use it. I always do a combination of, I write it, then I put it in, and I say, do this to it, do that to it, help me make it this, that, or the other. So that's how I use it. I use it every day as a PR person, I got to say. I use Muck Rack tools, I use ChatGPT AI tools, I use them all. And it really does help with efficiency. And none of us have the resources, as we all know. So enough resources to,
I think
yeah.
the detector on like what's AI and what isn't is always still like you. I think we all
Yeah.
we've all used AI for a while. We all have a good sense of what like bad AI writing is,
Yeah.
and that's no one wants that. So that doesn't mean all AI writing is bad, right? Because sometimes with the right prompting and the right human in the loop with that prompting, you can have something that's primarily AI written, but still pretty good. And if it's good in the sense that the information's there and fulfills the deliverable that you want to have, it's almost like, who cares if it's AI?
Yeah, I think from my perspective as a comms leader right now, I am seeing a little bit of um, folks taking advantage too much and using
Mm,
and relying a little too heavily on it. And so my job right now as a leader is to tell folks, hey, listen, you got to go back to your roots and write something original, because I'm starting to sense that you're relying a little too heavily, leaning too heavily on it, and I need some originality here. I'm seeing a little bit of that, and that's a little bit of a concern of mine. But
yeah,
I think, Yeah.
it's a thing I didn't get a chance to touch on, but the discipline of knowing when to use AI and when not to is another skill. Could be the sixth skill here, and if we had a little longer.
Yeah.
But that's a what you're identifying is a little bit like the struggle being the point sometimes, like in other words, like sometimes writing is thinking, and if you don't have a grasp on something, it's got to come from you, and so that it's because it's not just about the deliverable, right? Then it's about like you need to be able to command this topic. So absolutely, that's a time when you
Yeah.
don't want to use AI.
It's a whole nother LinkedIn Live conversation. We'll see you next time.
For sure.
Well, thank you, Pete. And thanks to all of our attendees for joining us. You've got all the contact info here. If you want to get in touch with us at Muck Rack, you know how to do that, or with Pete here. Thank you again for joining us. I hope you learned something. I certainly did. And Pete, thanks for being the best. So we'll see y'all next time. Take care. Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.